Greetings. This is Mpoki Thompson. You are watching Mwananchi Digital. I'm the managing editor for the Citizen newspaper. This is another episode of the Citizen Exclusive. Today we have the pleasure of having an audience with the Vice President of the World Bank for Eastern and Southern Africa, Dr. Victoria Kwakwa. Dr. Victoria, karibu sana. Welcome to Tanzania. Now, first and foremost, congratulations for your new role. This is your maiden visit to the region ever since you became the VP for the World Bank for Eastern and Southern Africa. You have met President Samia Suluhu Hassan. You have met President Mwinyi of Zanzibar, Finance Minister, along with other government officials. Tanzanians would like to know what were the major discussions, what has been pledged, what is the way forward?
Sure. Thank you very much. And you said karibu sana, I say asante sana. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm delighted to be here in Tanzania as my first official mission in this job. I've had very, very good discussions with government and with other non-government actors, with civil society and with the private sector. We discussed a lot of issues ranging from the government's response to the current multifaceted crisis, including the COVID, the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war. We also discussed how to make progress on human capital. We discussed the private sector and the government's intent to get more private sector into the economy. And in Zanzibar, we talked with the president about the blue economy and efforts towards that. And we talked about empowering women and the human capital, as part of human capital, the broader skills agenda. So we talked about agriculture and really trying to look at the opportunity to make Tanzania a breadbasket, not just for the region, but for Africa as a whole. So a lot of issues covered, substantive discussions. My takeaway coming out of the discussions is that we have a very, very strong partnership. I'm really impressed with the fact that Tanzania is doing so well on the macroeconomic front, given all the crises that the country is navigating like other countries. And most countries are in much, much worse shape. Tanzania is growing faster than other countries are. It's keeping its inflation in single digit. Its reserve cover is strong. And it's managing the macro, its fiscal deficit is also in good stead. So this is a good picture, but there's so much more to do. And as the World Bank, we're standing ready and shoulder to shoulder with the government and the people of Tanzania to continue to bring the support the country needs to really cement its entry into lower middle income country status and lay the foundations for becoming a successful upper middle income country. So I would say overall I've been very pleased with the discussions. We're committed to Tanzania's development. In the next round of IDA 20, we have about 2.1 billion. Over the next 3 years, we will work very closely with government to try and leverage even more resources so that we're able to bring much more than 2.1 billion over the next 3 years.
Okay, perfect. So I would like us now to delve a bit deeper on some of the highlights that you've made, starting off with the private sector. Overall, we understand that the World Bank has given Tanzania, in terms of development funding, up to a tune of around $6 billion in general for national and regional development projects. Now, in relation to the private sector, what specific assistance, if you will, has the World Bank extended to the private sector in order to enable it to recover from the adverse impacts of COVID-19? Beyond agriculture, what are maybe the other areas that you're looking towards in helping the private sector?
Sure, and I'll speak broadly about Africa, about the region, East and Southern Africa. Look, and on this, we were really worried with COVID and what was happening, that it could really pull back the private sector. And so our private sector arm, the IFC, really moved forward quickly and globally established $8 billion in fast-track support to private sector firms to help them to stay afloat and to stay open, even though their businesses were not going well. And we, as the World Bank, also contributed as well in trying to provide fiscal support to the government so that they could reduce tax rates or sort of delay tax payments, so private sector didn't have to worry for some time about paying taxes, giving them tax credits for employment, keeping the employees on their books so they didn't have to fire everybody. So we did a lot of that for the informal private sector, which is also a big part of Tanzania's private sector, and indeed in the broader region. We provided more traditional cash transfers, micro support to micro enterprises and so on. We worked particularly in the medium and MSME space. We worked in a range of sectors, particularly in tourism, which was badly hit. So we targeted certain sectors to provide some of the support to. Now, and so quite a few of the firms didn't have to let go of all their workers. They could, it gave them a bit of buffer through the financial support that we were giving to government, and government could support the firms. So that's what we've done. Now, coming out of COVID, we really have to support the recovery. The COVID support just kept them afloat. Now, the recovery is when you come to the real structural issues and helping the countries address the structural issues that constrain the private sector. So here in Tanzania, talking to the private sector about the issues that are problematic, whether it's in terms of access to finance, whether it's in terms of the business environment that is a bit challenged. And currently we're working with government on a budget support operation that would support the reforms that they're putting in place, including the Business Enabling Act and the Investment Act and so on. So we're trying to now look at the structural issues and the structural constraints. Our IFC colleagues, of course, are putting a lot of financing to firms, to try and help them recover. We're also looking at the financial sector, because during COVID, the financial vulnerabilities became significantly elevated, and that is not good for private sector growth. So we're doing a range of things, but we have our eyes very much on supporting private sector.
Yeah, just a bit more onto that, on helping the private sector recover through COVID-19, specifically with regards to the startups. Because we understand that the startup ecosystem here in Tanzania is thriving, it's growing. However, the access to finances is a bit limited from the banks that are existing here in Tanzania. Now, as the World Bank, as you're helping the wider private sector in Tanzania, is there perhaps a channel through which startups can be able to access finances for the businesses?
I mean, this is something we need to look at more carefully. I don't think we've done something necessarily with startups. That is clear. But in the context of IDA 20, which is just starting, and this round that we're looking at, this is clearly an area to focus a little bit more on and to support. And the startups are also typically the younger people, the youth with creativity, ideas, technology, all of that coming together. We're supporting progress on the technological fronts. That would also indirectly help them. But we need to be more deliberate and to take a closer look at that and really have a game plan for that.
Yes. On to food security. You talked about the idea of Tanzania perhaps becoming the bread basket for Africa. Recently, we saw the UN report, or rather the World Food Programme report with IFDA in terms of food insecurity in Africa. But the Tanzanian government says that there is enough, there's an abundance of food to supply food to Tanzanians and beyond. However, food prices are high, exacerbated by external factors. Now, how can the World Bank sort of help Tanzania in terms of tapping its full potential into scaling up the food production that perhaps possibly could lower the prices to the common consumers, but also be able to export externally? when you had a meeting with the finance minister, you had talked about enabling Tanzanians rise in terms of their financial capability. Now, this includes, the access to finances to buy food, but also be able to engage in agricultural activities that could enable them to export. So, in terms of food security and how Tanzania can tap its full potential, what does the World Bank have to say about that?
Sure. Thank you so much. Look, indeed, food security is a major issue across the region, across Africa. In the Horn of Africa alone, our estimates suggest that about 66 or over 60 million people are really at risk of food insecurity, and that's a major concern. At the same time, we have countries like Tanzania that clearly have huge potential to feed themselves and to feed others. Tanzania always produces in excess of what the country needs. But you're right. Given what is happening globally, given the rise in fuel prices, given the rise in the prices of fertilizers, because of a lot of it is originating in Ukraine and Russia, what's happening is that the input costs have gone up, and so the price of food is going up. That's a large part of what is happening. What can Tanzania do some more? When we had the discussion with the Minister of Agriculture, I was really impressed with the plans that the government has to really shore up agriculture in Tanzania and draw its full potential. You might be aware that the government, the budget this year for agriculture is more than doubled. That's already a very strong signal of the importance that the government is attaching to this. And so our sense, and the minister talked about really moving towards shoring up agricultural productivity. If you look all over Africa, climate change since the early 1960s has reduced productivity levels by about 34% for the region as a whole. That's not acceptable. And so how do you bring back agricultural productivity, make it a sector that is much more productive, bring in the right infrastructure, because a lot of the agriculture is rain-fed. So irrigation infrastructure particularly is key. A lot of the acreage that is arable in Tanzania doesn't have access to the needed irrigation infrastructure. So a big part of the government's efforts is to put irrigation in, to also work on issues of food waste. A lot is lost from harvest to market, and so addressing that as well will all raise the efficiency and the productivity of the sector and other issues as well, and that he's trying to do. So we're very supportive of this. We have a couple of projects that are coming up that will support what the government is trying to do, which we believe is a good plan. He also talked about finding ways to involve the private sector more in agriculture, because this is not just the government does it all. There's huge potential for the private sector to be involved, finding ways to get produce to markets. He was talking about sending more, doing more with trade with the DRC, where they need more through setting up warehouses and helping the private sector to be able to connect. So we're excited about the program that's shaping up in in agriculture in Tanzania. We think it really has potential to achieve what the government wants to see. I would like Tanzanian rice, being exported to Ghana, which is where I'm from, and we don't have as much or produce as much. So I think it's on a good track, and we've assured the minister, the government, that we are bringing in financing, not just financing, but knowledge and policy advice to support the implementation of this.
When it comes to agriculture, more to that, I mean, we have exported quite a bit in terms of what traditionally used to be food crops is now turning into cash crops, the grains, rice and all that. Now, let's talk about value addition, because that is a major issue. At times, local farmers, be it small scale or large scale, they don't really have the capability to, value add into their produce. Is there any initiative that aims at, ensuring that Tanzanian agriculturists do have the capability to value addition in terms of the production that they do?
Sure. Adding value is so critical because, if you don't add value, you're really missing out. There's so much more that you can gain from trading in value-added products or products that are further up the production value chain than just your ordinary produce. And so the government realizes as the private sector realizes it. There are things that are working well. Yesterday I was at a project in which we're helping women farmers get into seaweed production. And, you know, there were examples of them adding value to the seaweed. You know, they had soaps, they had seaweed oil, they had seaweed cream, body lotion, and so on. So that's value addition. And you're seeing this in other instances. The question is, how do you scale that up? And how do you do it more systematically, bring the quality in? And that is where we need, of course, you need financing. Sometimes it's a technology and access to it. You will need more connections between the producer side and the more formal private sector. You know, the bigger firms that can support. I talked about this seaweed. So these women who are trying to add value in their own way, how can they be supported by larger firms to do that and so on? So I think it's work in progress. We have a project that is on agricultural commercialization, which is really about adding value. Yeah. And so we hope that that will also contribute to the government's efforts. Yes.
Now let's talk a bit about climate change. COP27 is happening in Africa, in Egypt, in November. And there's all this narrative on how Africa can raise its case to the global audience, because we understand that as a continent, we are adversely more negatively impacted by climate change. So the World Bank, what is your take on Africa's role? And do you think that this matter of climate change is being prioritized enough by African governments?
I think African governments realize that climate change is real. You know, we see it every day. We see it in the fact that livelihoods are being lost. We see that climate events or extreme weather events are more frequent. Droughts have increased 3 times over the last few. The frequency of droughts in the region is about 3 times higher than it was a couple of decades ago. For storms, 4 times higher, and for floods, 10 times more. And so we see it daily, day in and day out, and they're more severe. We see it leading to loss of life, we see it leading to loss of livelihoods, urban habitats, and so on. So I think it's so visible what climate is doing, and I think the countries are tuned in. For Africa, the challenge about climate is really around climate adaptation. You know, and I think that we should really support the African countries to build more resilience to climate. You know, whether it's in terms of a more resilient agriculture and food systems and more resilient urban approaches to urban development. So I think the African countries get it and are doing the best that they can. We should also work with Africa to make sure that as they're expanding access to energy, they're tapping renewables more to bring the technology into them for storage and the financing that will help them tap renewables more. But I think that they recognize the urgency. I think it's up to the international community to really step up and support Africa on this very important challenge.
Okay, now let's touch a bit on corruption. We understand that the World Bank extends billions in terms of financial investment into various African countries. Retired Prime Minister of Tanzania, Mizengo Pinda, talked about how Tanzania is under siege when it comes to illicit financial flows. So how does the World Bank approach the issue of corruption in Africa in light of the massive investment that is being put by global financial institutions?
Sure, and I do agree with you that corruption is a problem. Corruption hurts the poor the most because they are deprived of access to economic opportunities and to basic services. So it's something that needs to be tackled. From the point of view of the World Bank, you know, for the longest time, we really didn't even talk about corruption. And it's not just the World Bank, it's the international community. But over the last few decades, we have evolved, and we talk about corruption, recognize the dangers to development and to our twin goals, and therefore really are doing a lot on that. Let me talk first about our own projects and how we make sure that the resources from the projects that we finance are not subject to fraud and abuse. First, we're making sure that the procurement systems are fully transparent, they bring in competition, the strong oversight, and then we also have a whole department, our integrity vice president, that investigates our allegations of corruption on the projects we finance, and with stiff penalties for firms that are caught to be corrupt in using these funds. So that's on the projects that we finance ourselves. And then we're also supporting governments to address this issue by working with them on public financial management and procurement systems that reduce the chances for corruption. So by bringing stronger systems in place, clear with transparency, with accountability, strengthening the voice of civil society groups, strengthening the audit office, all of these are things that we're trying to do to reduce the scope for resources of governments to be used in a corrupt manner. Our most recent book, which is called Enhancing Government Effectiveness, the fight against corruption, really provides some examples of tools and solutions that we're discussing with government, we're sharing with government. So just to say, this is a very important part of our work, and we start from prevention and trying to help governments close the loopholes, and then support them also in terms of taking the right steps to address corruption where it happens.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about cross-border trade. It has been said that Africa can save around $5 billion by using online means of payment, and we know that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is now making trade a bit more robust in Africa. Is the World Bank also eyeing the online means of transaction, between African countries, and the potential that it has in cutting the costs?
Sure. Look, I think that our sense is that even though there's variation across countries, Africa is a real pioneer in using technology to really provide access to financial services, particularly mobile payments. If you look globally, what is happening, Africa has the largest share of mobile payments. Of the 1.2 billion of mobile accounts, about 45% is in Africa, and about of the close to 800 billion that is transacted in mobile payments, easily 65% is from Africa. So in that sense, you can say that Africa is a pioneer. It's allowing easy access and transfer of resources. We also see that fintech has made some improvements because of technological improvements, because of operational approaches that have been enhanced. So the platform is being set for technology to really come in and support financial payments within countries and across countries. But there are gaps. It's not fully there yet. We can do a lot more as regards agriculture and digitalizing agricultural payments. And a lot of the African countries trade in agriculture. So whether it's agricultural transfers within the countries or across the countries, a lot more can be done. And we can also do more to facilitate the online payments. It's not all there. And on the mobile payments accounts and so on, there's a lot more to be done. We need to address some of the issues of cybersecurity and protecting online traders and online customers. And so there's a lot more to be done. But generally, Africa has made a good start and is really tapping technology for financial transfers and for trade. Yeah.
Okay, yes. I think it would be remiss if we don't talk about education. We understand that the World Bank is a big financier in terms of Tanzania's education sector. However, challenges still remain in terms of quality, just the scholastical accessibility of the infrastructure in the education sector. What do you think is the missing piece? How come Tanzania's education sector does not really evolve?
This is not just a problem of Tanzania. I think globally we're seeing a crisis of learning. And we're seeing across Africa, even when progress is being made, that in the numbers and the enrollment and so on, that quality is really a problem. You know, and the gaps come also from curriculums that are not appropriate or don't meet the needs of education of now. The way that teaching is done is a bit of a problem. Sometimes the infrastructure for students or for studying is not good enough. You have classrooms with 100 students and so on. There isn't technology being brought in enough into education, and sometimes children are hungry. You know, you're sitting in a class, you haven't had your breakfast or your meal, you're not concentrating. So your ability to learn is limited, and sometimes children come to schooling with some disadvantages already that don't position them well to learn, even when they're being taught. So some of these apply to Tanzania as well, but it's a bigger problem. And so these are the things that we're trying to work with governments across the region and the government of Tanzania as well. And we also see the issue of the lack of access for girls in particular. But on the quality, the Ministry of Education is doing a lot to look at the curriculum. It's being looked at. They're looking at how to bring more technology into service provision of education. And this needs to be combined with the whole idea of nutrition and good nutritional outcomes for children as they start school and continue their education. So there's a lot to be done, and we're glad to be a partner to Tanzania and to other countries in the region in tackling this problem. Thank you.
Amazing. Dr. Kwakwa, that's a wrap. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Well, you were with me, Mpoki Thompson, for Mwananchi Digital. Until next time, bye-bye.